Thanks for taking the time to download this BBC Radio 5 Live podcast. To search for other podcasts you might like, click bbc.co.uk/5live, where you'll also find our terms of use.
The Real Sounds of Africa to once again kick off our World Football phone-in. This morning we're talking football in Europe and South America with the best-dressed chicken in town, Mina Rzouki, our colonel, and our legendino, Tim Vickery, over in South America. Mina will take care of any questions on European football, and he plays from over this side, and the legendino will take care of football in South America and players from over there playing in our leagues as well. And as we always like to think, the Real Sounds of Africa does give us a sense of pride in that hopefully they're able to feed an entire village of the royalties they get from us playing this on a World Football phone-in. Good morning to you both.
Morning, how you doing?
Morning.
Very well, thanks very much. Just to warn you, ladies and gentlemen, this is the 400th anniversary of Shakespeare's death, so any references is being regarded as an extra goal tonight, if you like.
Yeah, I was listening to that segment earlier on, and I was just wondering maybe perhaps Dr. Adebayo hath eaten people out of house and home in the past.
And tonight will be no different, Mr. Vickery, whether it be in the past or the present. And of course, Mina, you've got the advantage because everywhere you name in Italy has a Shakespeare reference to it. You know,
Indeed.
Venice, the Merchant of Venice, Rome. Oh, in the back with Julius Caesar, Verona. You know, love, and all of that. So you'll have the advantage this morning. Is that okay? Are you prepared for this challenge?
I always want the advantage.
Of course, why not? And you won't be surprised to know that you've already had a Francesco Tosi question in the mix. Yeah. But I'm
I was wondering when that was going to come.
Don't worry, it came even before Sligo Rovers was mentioned, and Tim knows that because he's got a stopwatch on that one. Okay, what about this one then? To kick off this morning's World Football phone-in. It's a good one as well, actually, from Damien, who wants to know, are football shirt numbers relevant in your respective regions as indicators of players' field positions? You know, like in the old days, we knew that a number 10 was an inside right, and a number 8 was, an inside left, and a number 8 was an inside right, that kind of thing. Do you want to go first, Mina?
Well, no, that doesn't really hold true anymore. It now depends on the club, sort of, which famed number you're going to take. In Italy, for example, the number 10 is more like a trequartista role, which is the man in the hole behind the front two. So you'll have those. They stay true, I guess, in the terms of the defenders. And but now everyone is just allowed to take whatever number they like. So I don't think we hold on to that.
Apart from the goalie.
Apart from the goalie.
Is a number 9 a number 9?
A number 9 is always number 9, and then you have the striker's always number 9, or they'll take a number 11. So yeah, you do have that, and then you have the same number 5 as usual. You'll have the number 1 being the number 1, but you don't have to take those numbers. For example, in Juventus, the number 21 is very famous, and obviously it belonged to Pirlo, and now it belongs to Paulo Dybala. So it doesn't really necessarily have anything to do with with the number 21.
So you can be in any position and still have that number 21?
You can indeed.
What about in South America, Tim?
Well, although we've gone through the same thing where, that the player can be wearing 188 or something like that, especially in Argentina, people still refer to the positions by their numbers. So-and-so is a really good 5. Now, a 5 for Argentine football is not the centre-back. The 5 is the holding midfielder who sits in front of the centre-back. So-and-so is a really good number 8. That'll be the right-sided midfielder. So although this doesn't bear that much relation anymore, it still bears a little bit of relation, but although it doesn't bear that much relation to the numbers that the player actually wears on his back, in Argentina especially, people still refer to the number as a player who performs a certain function on the field.
Mm. And what about the likes of a number 9, a centre forward? Is that a position that people associate with any particular number or not?
No, I think number 9. I associate with it with a Beatles song as well, number 9. But I think in football terms, it's you know, and people all over South America talk about that. You know, our team lacks a genuine number 9. The fella who you're thinking of filling that position, he could be wearing number 67, but he's still that function will still be referred to as a genuine number 9.
Yeah, this is a good question from John in Henderson, Kentucky. He says he's got 2 young sons. One's called Michael, he's aged 8. Another called Samuel, aged 6. They listen to the programme every week. They're able to do that because it's not past their bedtime over their side of the water. And not surprisingly, he says Michael likes players named Michael. And his favourite player is Michael Carrick. And Samuel likes players named Samuel. And his favourite player, yes, you guessed it, is Samuel Eto'o. But as the careers of those players are coming to an end, they're going to need new players to support. So their question is whether each of you panellists can give them an up-and-coming Michael or Miguel. They're happy to take Miguel, or an up-and-coming Samuel, and I'm sure they're happy to take Sami Nasri, for example, even though it's spelled slightly different. Tim, can you start off with that? And Miguel and Michael and Sammy?
I think that's a European one, really.
You can't duck out of it that easily.
I'm trying to think. You know what? That should be one that we use throughout the whole segment, so throughout the whole show, just come up with different names that we can think of.
Yeah, any Michael, Miguel. You know, in South America, in Brazil of all places, where they can bring on a Socrates when they need to, and he's complaining about European names. Come on, mate. You've got to work hard on that this morning.
Yeah, but the European names tend to be like Washington, Wellington. My favourite, there's a Wellington out there, which is spelt Ueilton. Totally phonetically, the way they say it. Wellington. There is the odd Samuel. I've seen the odd Samuel. One or two Michaels. There was a Michael that, unfortunately, is not really a role model for our young listeners because he's failed some drug tests. I'll have to give this one some more thought.
Yeah, give it some more thought.
Yeah, me too.
Give it some more thought.
I'm trying to think. Well, I bet you the Samuel Eto'o was huge for that kid.
Oh, yeah, it must have been fabulous for him. And because we know there is a Wellington in Brazil.
Wellington!
Is there a Napoleon? Is there one?
I think there was, but he got blown apart.
Tim, how could you stoop to that level, mate?
I'm sorry. I've finally met my Waterloo. I'm sorry.
It's getting worse and worse. I had respect for you, but anyway, like I say, I had respect for you. Oh, here's one Shakespearean connection. This is coming just now from Boz, who says, of course, Richard III, of course, is, a Leicester boy now, whether he started off as a York boy or not, buried in a car park in Leicester. And because of that, maybe with Leicester being at the top of the table, the Foxes might be quoting Shakespeare at the end of the season. And the one quote that he thought that they should be trying out is, "Bloody thy art, bloody will be thy end." That sounds like a Richard III quote, definitely, if ever there was one. What about this from Roberto in Bridgeport, Connecticut? Question for you, Tim. Cerro Porteño's chances against Boca Juniors in the Copa Libertadores round of 16 next week. What are their chances?
Well, Cerro Porteño, they're probably Paraguay's most popular club. And they've never won an international title. And this is a real trauma for them. Their big rivals, Olimpia, have won the Libertadores 3 times. And it's an absolute trauma for Cerro Porteño, this. You know the way that international club competition could be an extension of domestic rivalries. We're in the Champions League, you're not. So Cerro Porteño get it all the time that they've never won a domestic title. Now, they made really, really hard work of qualifying. They had to win at home to Colombian opposition Santa Fe. They got gifted a goal. Santa Fe then had 2 players sent off, so they're down to 9 men, and they still ran the game because Cerro Porteño was so absolutely convulsed with nerves because it just means so much to them. Now, I think it probably benefits them that they're against Boca Juniors because all of the favouritism will be with Boca Juniors. They've just changed their coach, Cerro Porteño, Gustavo Morínigo, who was an international midfielder, who was a good player. I think he's going to be a better coach. He's an interesting coach, but Boca are clearly the favourites. It's very early for Morínigo. He's only had 2 games so far, and he is changing the shape of the side a little bit, going to a 4-3-3. I can certainly see them causing problems to the Boca defence. I'm surprised how few goals Boca conceded in the group phase because the 2 centre-backs are slow, quick, slow, without the quick bits. So you can certainly embarrass them. But having said that, I think Boca are clear favourites, although maybe Cerro Porteño will enjoy being underdogs.
And that is a foxtrot, the quick, slow. Do they know that then? Do they know it's Christmas?
Well, they probably do know it's Christmas, yes. I've thought of a Samuel Galindo, who was a Bolivian, who was at Arsenal briefly, is a kind of lean playmaker who's yet to fulfil his potential, but might be one to watch there, Samuel Galindo.
Charma is with us in Dagenham. Charma, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Sim. Good morning, Mina. Good morning, Dr.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, tell us your question.
Yeah, sure. I'm a massive Prince fan. And since the
Sorry,
passing
which
of his
who's
birth-
Prince, you know, the...
Oh, Prince. Sorry.
Come on, Mina.
Sorry.
I'm in
She's
mourning
awake.
right now. You can't.
She's awake now,
you can't
Charma.
ask these questions.
You-
Okay.
You've woken her up like it's 1999, yeah.
Oh, Dodson, I honestly shed tears in my mother's arms at his
Yeah.
passing. Anyway, it's football friendly. Since the
But you're going to
passing
tie
of-
it in, aren't you? You're going to tie Prince in
Of
with
course,
football.
of course. Yes,
Okay.
yes, I will.
I know he was
Or-
decent at basketball, surprisingly, at
He
school.
was a great
At school,
basketball
even though
player,
he's only
indeed,
5'2", he was decent
Yeah,
at basketball
yeah,
in school.
indeed.
And was he good
Indeed,
at
yeah.
soccer, as they call it over there? Do you know if he had a low centre of gravity and all that?
He had the figure for a low centre of gravity, but let me get to the question.
Okay. I'll sit back. I'll think of Shakespeare. You get to the question. I'll start thinking of a good Shakespeare quote to follow it.
Please do. So since his purpleness's passing, the sports teams of his local area, Minnesota/Minneapolis, have paid a deep tribute to him because he was a big fan of the sports teams in the city. And my question is very simple. In Tim and Mina's region, is there any local celebrity, local hero who's been a big fan of, who's embodied their sports teams in the way that Prince has embodied the sports teams of his area? Is there anyone who, if they passed, would the football teams that they come from would truly mourn their passing because, as well as being a celebrity, they were a fan of the sports team, of the football team as well?
That, I think, is a really brilliant question to kick off our phone in this morning, actually. I genuinely do, Charma, because
Thank you.
there are people who are umbilically linked to a town or to a team in that town. In that way, Mina, is there somebody in the Spanish, Italian or German leagues that you can think of that if they pass, that the football team would have to make the kind of tribute that Charma talks about that Minnesota are paying to Prince this weekend?
It's got to be, I would say, so you're basically saying it's got to be like a singer or entertainer, or?
No,
Can it
anybody.
be
A fame, someone of fame, but outside of obviously football and fame.
What about a mafia boss?
Well, if that works. Who would it be?
Is this Napoli or
What's you all in all when you quickly pointed to Napoli? That's so accusing.
Well, it's not Milan, is it? It's not Milan, let's face it.
It is actually Napoli. No, what I was going to say was actually it's a funny story that came up over the weekend. It's the first thing that's come to my head because I'm trying to think of famous people and the clubs they suffer. But basically, an alleged mafia boss was arrested on Saturday because he was distracted watching Inter Napoli. So Napoli were defeated 2-0 by San Siro, and the Italian police used the occasion to arrest Roberto Manganiello. I don't remember his name. and I'm also a bit scared to say it, so we're gonna just go over that.
No, you've said the alleged bit. You've said the alleged bit, but
yes, alleged,
Yeah.
listed as one of Italy's most dangerous criminals. But he's only 35 years old, so, and he's linked to like all these double homicides and these gang wars that go on in Napoli. But he was arrested during the one because he got so disturbed by the match that they used it as an opportunity, the police, to disguise themselves as pizza delivery boys. And they went over to his home and he let them in because he was just watching the game. And he is supposed to be a major player in the Camorra Mafia.
Did they know? Did they know that he was a massive football fan and a fan of this team that was playing in particular?
Yeah, they did. I mean, this is
so
the thing.
Sneaky.
They used it.
That's so sneaky. I didn't think cops are that sneaky.
But they actually dressed up as pizza delivery boys, and apparently he moves around a lot. It's really hard to get him there, but because it was a huge game, it's on a Saturday night, it's into Napoli, so they used that occasion to basically go in and knew that he would be distracted so he wouldn't be on his game.
They exploited the man's Achilles heel. That's another probably, well, that's a Greek reference, isn't it, rather than a Roman one. They use his weakness against him in that way.
No, he was also with a lady.
Oh well,
Poor
then.
girl.
Oh well, then.
She was also,
he deserves to get banged up. Then, in that case, but no, allegedly.
You should definitely understand as well.
But Charmer, that works, doesn't it? That works as a.
Yeah.
I'll keep thinking though. More
on that
famous
team,
people.
Tim is bound to go for Pablo Escobar, surely.
No, surely not. Tim,
let's see
surely
what
not.
he has to say.
Let's see what he has to say. Go on, then.
Well, because we can come up with a more concrete example of where this actually, where the name of the team was named, after the local celebrity. I think we might have talked about this last week. This is from Bolivia, the city of Cochabamba. They had one of the pioneers of aviation. Yeah, and remember how glamorous the early flyers were. A fellow called Jorge Wilstermann. And he died in probably the way he would have wanted to go. He died on a daring flight. So the local club in the city of Cochabamba changed its name and became Jorge Wilstermann. So you can't go much further than that to pay tribute to a local hero, can you?
Who would it be in the UK, in England, Charmer? Who do you think would earn that kind of a tribute?
That is an unbelievable question. Maybe. Maybe
I'm telling you, it's
David
Piers
Bowie
Morgan.
for Palace, because he embodied South London so deeply.
Okay.
I don't know if he was a football fan, but if he was a football fan, would have probably been a Palace fan because he embodied South London so deeply. Maybe the Beatles for Liverpool. I'm not so sure, but
See, the only person I can think of that comes to mind for me is Lucky Jim. The fellas all call him Lucky Jim. He's got a girl for Monday, Tuesday, every day of the week. Do you know what I'm talking about, Charmo? You from a younger generation?
Beyond my time. I only turned 25 yesterday.
Yeah, well, congratulations, by the way.
Congrats.
Happy
Right.
birthday.
Well, it was the day that Prince died. I'm a massive Prince fan, so it was a bit mixed emotion.
Of course, yeah, of course. Jimmy Tarbuck, Everton fan, isn't he? So I'd have thought that.
Oh, yeah, no, I've heard of him. I've heard of him.
You have
Yeah.
heard of him. That's good. Oh, of course,
From my parents.
Delia Smith. Let's not forget Delia Smith. I mean, come on.
Yeah, she was a massive Liverpool fan. Yeah, amazing.
Delia Smith.
Dotton. I've got one actually.
Go on.
I've forgotten her name, but Norwich.
Yeah, Delia Smith.
That is Delia Smith. Yeah, Norwich.
You
yeah,
youngsters,
that's
mate. Look, I'm going to chuck you a history book for
sorry.
free. Don't
I'm
worry.
sorry, yeah.
No, not at all,
I
Charmer.
would say Delia Smith Norwich, actually, to be honest. If I had to say one, I would
What
say
about-
Delia Smith for Norwich.
Is Tom Brady a Leicester City fan? Because he did that little thing where he sent a little message to Kasper Schmeichel to say,
That's
we're all
probably PR.
supporting you.
Probably PR.
I
That is
suppose-
probably PR.
I suppose the whole country's a Leicester City fan
Yeah,
nowadays.
a genuine one,
Speak
probably
for
Delia
yourself.
Smith for Norwich, yeah.
Yeah.
Noel Gallagher was...
Elton John Watford. Sorry. Yeah,
Oh,
Elton
that's
John
a good
Watford.
one.
That's the one. That's the one.
Well, but no, Mina mentioned the Gallagher brothers of Oasis,
Gallagher
Manchester
Brothers,
City.
Man City. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a few.
Yeah.
There's a few in this country.
And of
but
course-
I would go Elton John Watford.
Elton John Watford, yeah, he spent a lot of money on Watford, so they better give him a tribute.
Yeah, that's the
spent
one
his
I'd go.
millions on that team. And what about Prince William and Aston Villa? Oh, he does want to mention them at the moment, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah. I don't think that the royal family would want to make that association
Do you know-
too well known.
A few people have sent in some suggestions, and I think this from Stephen Cornwall went by the radar. Rod Stewart and Celtic, wouldn't he have to?
Yeah.
Have to get a tribute from them.
The only problem is he wasn't from Glasgow.
Well,
so I'm trying to think
he has got Scottish roots,
but Prince grew up in Minneapolis. Do you know what I mean? So it is that.
But Rod did wear the tartan. Do you remember? He wore the tartan before the Bay City Rollers.
I'm trying to think of someone who not only was from the city but lived in the city. And everyone
Antonio Banderas in Malaga.
Okay.
He was there at the time when Pellegrini was coach, and they were on board. They were in the Champions League, and they were somewhat hard done by.
None of these go past Elton John and Watford for me, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think that's the one for the UK, Elton John and Watford.
Elton John, okay. We'll wrap it up on that one, Elton John.
Rest in peace, though.
Yeah, Charmo, it's great to speak to you, and happy birthday once again. And thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for kicking off the phone in that way this morning. Actually, quite a really good call, I think, and it spread our wings slightly because it gave us a chance to extrapolate a lot of different threads there, indeed, for people who wanted to talk about Prince as well on this morning. Now, Rishi in Newcastle's question about Francesco Totti, Mina, is after Francesco Totti's heroics off the bench for Roma this week, can you think of any other talismanic player who continues to perform for a club late on in their career? And that question goes to you as well in a moment, Tim. But Mina first. Do you want to explain what these heroics off the bench was, by the way, for those who don't know?
Yeah, basically he's just been allowed only a few minutes at the end of certain matches, and in his last one when Roma were playing against Torino, he had, I think it was a whole 7 minutes or something. He came on, he scored 2 goals and basically turned the game around because they were losing to Torino, and then they won the match. And he's basically provided 3 goals and 1 assist. In his last 3 matches. Or maybe it's 4 goals. I think it's 4 goals and 1 assist. So it's like a huge kerfuffle in Roma because everyone's like, well, look at him and look at the quality he provides. He's only been offered like these handful of minutes. And it's true because in certain matches, it's not even been 7. It's been like 3 minutes and he's come on and done something sublime, whether it be, scoring the necessary goal, which he got the equalizer against Atalanta to get them a point, 3-3 at the time. He's just changed everything around. But the problem is that no matter how wonderful he is, him being there takes away the authority of the coach because he just gets everyone involved. You do not understand the scenes in Italy when he managed to turn the game around in Torino. There were people crying in the stands. There was a commentator who was talking about the game who stopped speaking and then just started shouting because he was crying so much, saying that he's the only one, he's the guy, he's number one. It's like, I don't know what it is about Totti and Roma, but it's like a love story that just refuses to end. And it feels like it just sweeps over the entire country and everyone's like, he's the man, how can anyone do this to him? And there are like loads of people who hate Spalletti for casting him aside and putting him on the bench, and others who agree with him because at the end of the day, this is still a club and they cannot depend on a 39-year-old while they're building for the future and trying to win the Champions League at some point in the future.
He's the only one, he's the man, he's the number one, he's the new Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, isn't he?
Yeah, but you could say Buffon is doing, well, he's also old, and what he's doing for Juventus is just unbelievable. He's managed to keep a record clean sheet. He's gone the most amount of minutes without having anyone score against him. He's still the leader of Juventus side that started the season so badly and now sit 9 points ahead of Napoli and top in Serie A. So you could say Buffon is another guy. Del Piero was shown the door a lot quicker than Totti will be in Roma. Perhaps this is his last season. We still don't know. But on that level, Toto Di Natale did great for Udinese as well. Again, now not so much. Luca Toni was top scorer for Hellas Verona, but he's moved around a lot. He's a journeyman. But when he's allowed to play, he is sensational. He's still old. But there's no one like Totti also because the talent that he possesses is far greater than all those that I mentioned before.
Yeah, Tim, were you taking notes there?
Well, I was just reading a tweet. We're well reminded by Mr. Mark Cole that in terms of celebrity supporters, they don't come bigger than the Pope and San Lorenzo, do they? San Lorenzo in Argentina.
Oh.
Also, Viggo Mortensen, the Hollywood actor, is a huge San Lorenzo fan, and he grew up. Some of his formative years were in Argentina, so and he's a huge San Lorenzo fan. And in terms of these veteran players, we've just lost the biggest one of all, which was the São Paulo goalkeeper, Rogério Ceni, who was the goalkeeper there for way more than 20 years and scored more goals than any other goalkeeper. Mina regularly makes the point that these long-serving, they can become something of a detrimental thing inside the dressing room. You know, they get too much power, too many privileges, and we've just seen an indication of that in a club in Colombia, Santa Fe. Their star man for years has been an Argentine playmaker, Omar Perez. He's now the other side of the veteran stage. He waddles around, and a coach just walked out because he just couldn't cope with the power that Perez had in the dressing room. So sometimes I agree with Mina on this point. Sometimes these people are lauded, but if you're actually inside the dressing room, their effect is not always positive.
So we've got the Legendino in Rio, Tim Vickery answering questions on South American football and players from over there playing in our leagues. And we've got the Colonel, Mina Rzouki, over this side of the water. Take care of any of your questions on European football, particularly the German, Italian and Spanish leagues. And Jay in Warrington, Mina and Tim, has got a great question, haven't you, Jay?
Hello, good morning, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Okay. Hello,
Yeah.
Tim. My question, Tim's probably going to have a bucket of answers for this one. Is there any player in Europe or South America who's been at the top of the game and literally destroyed the career and then come back and been at the top of the game again? I can't think of any.
You reckon Tim's got a bucket load of answers?
I think Tim might have a few.
I think we'll start with Maradona and then get all the buckets in, Tim. Go on.
Sorry, wait, hold on. The top of the game?
Yeah. Just
Top of the
repeat.
sports, top of the game, top of their profession. You know, won trophies, etc. Been at the top of the game and literally ruined it all for themselves, and then come back a few years later and done it all again. Is there anybody you can think
Done
of?
it all again with or without
done it all
success?
again.
With or without success. So, Tim, have you got your buckets filled up or you got a hole in them?
Because I think it's very hard to do. I think football is such a dynamic process that once you miss that bus, I think it's very hard to get back on it. However good you are, I think it's really hard. The closest I've seen to this is Romario, and the great Romario, and he was always a problem, I think, because what he wanted to do was only what he wanted to do and nothing else, and he didn't really want to train. And also, he was always looking for privileges inside the group, which made him a very tiresome player to deal with on a long-term basis. So after 1994, when he's chosen as the world's best player, he then moves back to Brazil. Brazil had just introduced a new currency. It was very strong at the time, and he's very sharp financially, and he realised he could earn big money back in Brazil. But he really didn't care anymore, and he spent the next 2 years just not caring, and he really living on his name, and he admitted this afterwards. 95 and 96, he just got by on natural talent. He would stand with his hands on his hips. He would ruin a few careers of promising youngsters, moaning at them and so on. But he just didn't care anymore. And then what happened? Ronaldo exploded at Barcelona in the second half of 1996, the very place where Romario had, albeit briefly, been king. And because football had globalised more in those 2 or 3 years, Ronaldo was getting more repercussions than Romario had. And that really made Romario turn the tap on. And after he came back from injury, he came back at the start of 1997, and he was unbelievable again. He was fantastic again. And for the next few months, he was just a goal machine. But it all catches up with you in the end. And the 1998 World Cup, which could have been, even though he was 33, it really could have been his thing. But he wasn't fit enough to play. He had to be dropped from the squad. And you saw it every time the weather got cold, he would pull up with muscle injuries. So and he is one who managed to regain, who kind of threw it away for a little while, managed to regain his level and came back. But even he was beaten by the ravages that time caused to your body in the end. I suppose Ronaldo is a great example as well, although and his injuries were not self-inflicted. That was knee problems. Yeah. Perhaps the consequence of being bulked up too much, so his knees couldn't stand the upper body strength, because he was a skinny little kid when he started up, but he came back and was magnificent in the 2002 World Cup. And although, again, after that, in the next few years after that, he was brilliant intermittently, but he could never really put a consistent run together because he would always break down. So I think the main lesson from this story...
That's the one I thought Tim was a Ronaldo, but not the new Ronaldo, the older Brazilian Ronaldo. That's the one I thought of. Well, I can't think of any European players.
Mina's got a bucket or two. Mina?
I wish, but I was going to name another Brazilian, but I don't know. I don't think he's come back or standing to the top levels. But
that's cheating, Nina. That's
exactly.
Okay.
You tell her, Jay.
I was going to name Adriano.
I was going to
name Adriano, but I will name someone else if it makes you happy.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Francesco Acerbi, who is a defender for Sassuolo, and he's beaten cancer twice. Now he's played for Milan, and now he plays for Sassuolo. He's played for Chievo and Genoa and quite a lot of them. You know, scored a goal, got cancer, unfortunately was out, came back, and in his preseason, in one of the games they did a doping test. He failed it, and that's when they actually realized that it wasn't that he failed his doping test, but that actually he's gotten a relapse of his cancer. And then he's come back now, and he should be part of Antonio Conte's Italian team in the Euro 2016, which I think is remarkable on that level.
That's a good stat.
Although we've got to give a shout out for Darren Fletcher, haven't we, Jay? Considering what he went through at the end of his Manchester United career, and then picked up. I mean, who would have known? And I take your point, Tim, about when you miss the bus, it doesn't come back again, as it were. That's the problem that Leicester have got to face now. They either win the league now or never, is what a lot of people are saying. In any case,
Dutton, before I go, Dutton, can I ask another question? If it's being really rude,
go on then. Yeah, no, be really rude in the way that Mina was when she was trying to answer the question with a South American reference. Be really rude in that way.
He played in Europe.
Can you name any other team that's done a Leicester City?
That's done a Leicester City in your regions. Tim, do you want to go first?
From any region, going to relegation to winning the Premier, which looks pretty good.
It's much more common over here because things are so much more fluid. The best teams are always, as a result of winning a title, they're selling their best players. So then they go back down, and there's space for someone new to come up. So it's much more common. The most exotic example I can think of is a team from the provinces in Uruguay. There are very few teams outside Montevideo called Rocha, and Rocha. They won the first division, and their mascot was this cow. So when they won the Uruguayan first division, the cow came on the field to do a lap of honour. They're back in the second division now, but it's much more common here, which makes the less. Go on, Don.
No, was a lap of honour the only thing the cow did on the field?
Yes.
Oh dear.
Yes. So, which makes, I think, it makes the Leicester thing even more extraordinary, that they're doing it in an environment without that fluidity, where the best teams are able to hold on to their best players. Although I was on Brazilian TV today, and I was explaining their concept of a Devon lock. So, especially after Tottenham's performance against Stoke on Monday night, the pressure cranking up, I'm not ruling out a Devon lock.
Yeah, from your region, Mina, Leicester City, who's done that?
It's got to be Hellas Verona when they won Serie A in 1985. In the 1980s, a betting syndicate that had been paying players to rig results was uncovered. There was a huge scandal, and 33 different people were charged with fraud, and it resulted in both Lazio and AC Milan being relegated. So this created huge changes for the upcoming season, which was the 1984 to 85. And basically, instead of allowing the Italian FA to decide which referees would be taking on which matches, they were all randomly selected at the time. Incidentally,
so it can happen all over the world, but not in the UK as much.
It can't. No, listen. I think in most. I mean, obviously you'll have different ones that will pop in and pop out. You know, I guess for many it was Atletico Madrid. I mean, not that long ago you had Real Madrid fans putting up posters that said, wanted a serious derby, a genuine challenger in the city. And lo and behold, they've got one that they wish they never had, which is this wonderful competition with Atletico Madrid, who are also 1 point ahead of them this season. So you could say it's that, but they're not a Leicester City by any stretch of the imagination. But Hellas Verona winning Serie A in 1985 was just huge, even though there was all this about, now that the referees were randomly chosen and all of that business. And it came with some controversy. The fact of the matter is they played the better football and they won that season, and it was unusual because it wasn't Milan, it wasn't Inter, and it wasn't Juventus.
And just in answer to your first question, Bob, go on, Tim.
On that player thing, I just thought of it as a strange case. Not someone who destroyed his career, but someone who walked away for a year. He's a fellow in Chile. His name is Juan Pedro Fuenzalida. Who's a kind of busy little right-sided midfielder. Had a spell with Boca Juniors, and has played for Chile, although never a top liner. But a few years ago now, he took a year off to go and study. I think he's studying like engineering or something like that. And he came back and he managed to get back on the bus. It probably helps that he's not a top player, and great things have never really been expected from him. And he did it at a very young age. He did it early 20s. And if you do it late 20s, I think it's harder to get back on the bus. And that's an interesting example of someone who for a year decided that football wasn't his priority.
But hang on, Jay, before you go, there's been a couple more, and particularly here, with regards to people who arguably threw it all away and then came back. Tony Adams says, Charmer, our previous caller, of course, self-confessed alcoholic, league winner in 1989. Then he confesses his alcoholism, goes to prison, then becomes a double winner in 1998 and 2002. That is a good shout, I'd have thought, and arguably from the same team and the same era, Paul Merson. Think about that. He did make a comeback, and he was still a pretty decent player at that as well. I think we have, even though we have less examples of Leicester than the rest of the world, we have more examples of the players that make comebacks than everybody else. So it swings and roundabouts, isn't it?
Well, thank you for your answers, guys.
Yeah, especially my answers. Thank you.
Your contribution, Justin, was overwhelming. Your contribution was always overwhelming.
You don't need to say that. Always overwhelming. I'm sure that's a compliment. But no.
The only thing that upsets me is, as a young boy playing football in the 80s, I was Johnny, on the backfield. My nickname was Mattini because the second name's Matthews after Michel Platini. And now, after all the FIFA thing, I'm pretty upset about that.
Yeah. Imagine my nickname was Sepp Blatter. Imagine me. No, I'm only kidding. It could have been worse. So,
oh dear.
Jay, we can't do it without you, so feel free to call any time, yeah?
Thank you. I've got a referee question for next week.
I look forward to that one. Hey.
I need some sleep.
Absolutely.
Good night.
Good. Well, stay awake to the end of the football phone at the very least. Yeah, cheers, Jay. 0500 909 693. The number to call if you'd like to join in our conversation. Incidentally, you know that question that we had earlier about footballers or celebrities? It was Charmer's question about celebrities that are umbilically linked with a football team, to the extent that the football team might pay them the kind of tribute that the Minneapolis sports teams are going to play to Prince this weekend. Robbie Williams and Port Vale, umbilically linked, would you say?
Yeah.
And this other one from Mark in Delaware, USA. In honour of Prince Rogers Nelson, or Prince to us, who are the best teams in world football to wear purple, at least in your regions? And I suppose it's not Sampdoria, is it? Which is the team in Italy?
Fiorentina.
Fiorentina, that's it. That had Gabriel Batistuta wearing that purple.
Indeed.
Didn't look good on him, though. Is that the most famous team from Italy or in your region that wears purple?
Yeah, they're called the Viola as well. So they're named after purple. It's a formidable team. They've raised some great talent, Batistuta being one, obviously Roberto Baggio being another. And they've also created good coaches. Vincenzo Montella was lauded for the approach and the type of football that he's introduced to Fiorentina, in the way that they're just so beautiful to watch. They're somewhat more Spanish in style as comparison to the more physical and rigid tactics that sometimes people associate to Italian football. And now they're under Paolo Sousa, and they started off really wonderfully, even topped the league at one point. They've dropped off a little bit since because it's quite hard to match up to what they have ahead of them in the likes of Roma, Napoli, and Juventus. But yeah, definitely. I mean, this is a huge team in Italy, huge supporters, and owned by a family that is really famous in terms of luxury brands and stuff, including Tod's and other things. They shut down Harrods the other day so that they could continue their shopping into the late night hours.
As you'd expect. But why do they wear purple? It doesn't seem to be, I'm not trying to be like Reservoir Dogs, but pink, purple, brown, you can't wear them on a football pitch, can you?
Well, Juventus used to wear pink. That was their It's their away colour as well. And then you have Palermo who play pink and pink as well. Why is that weird?
No, I'm just thinking, for football teams, those aren't the regular colours that you associate with football. Purple does look odd on a football pitch. Even before I knew about Fiorentina, I'd seen them play in purple when I think Channel 4 used to do the Italian football coverage back in the old days. And you always thought that was incongruous in some way. I don't know why. Why should purple be odd? But you still haven't answered my question. Why do they play in purple?
I don't actually know, you know.
Tim?
I've absolutely no idea.
No, I meant from your region.
Colour. I can't think of purple, but I can think of pink. Sport Boys of Peru, who I think I always found it quite appropriate. But they play in bright pink. They've fallen on hard times, Sport Boys of Peru. You do get some kind of, there are some with orange and so on, but I can't think of anyone with purple.
How about brown?
What a horrible colour.
What, you see? You were complaining a moment ago when I said purple and pink. And
I
brown
know, because
is
I
just
think
as bad.
purple is quite an acceptable colour.
Is it?
Actually, I do know the story. I'm trying to think. Didn't Cellino think that purple was... wasn't it Cellino that thinks it's highly unlucky, the Leeds guy? I do know the story, actually, of Fiorentina. But that's just because... anyway, the players wore, at the time, red and white, and apparently it was a washing mistake. They put it all together and it came out with purple, and they just had to wear purple. Actually, these are the stories that come up all the time in Italy. Like why there's certain teams who play in black and white, and usually it's always a mistake.
This is a good question from Dan in Swansea. Do you know of any footballers in your regions that ever played in a wig or a toupee or, some kind of hairpiece? That is...
Gervinho? No, I'm joking.
He's saying, because he's linked this up with Shakespeare's 400th anniversary of Shakespeare's death, and he says, toupee or not toupee, that is the question.
There are a few in the old-timers who were going... We're going way, way back, 1930s stuff, who used to play in, like, caps, berets and stuff. But I can't think of a... It wouldn't last very long, would it? It's going to get pulled off.
Yeah, at some point or other.
Have you seen that picture
Just like
of
Moberg
Gervinho?
does to Lotterman in the Run Diaries. It's going to get pulled off.
What's the picture you talk of, Mina?
There's one of Gervinho, and how it always looks like, he always puts that, like, sort of bandana thing over his head, and it looks like he has, like a fringe when coming. But then you saw that it's actually he's bald, and he just moves his hair forward. What about hair implants? Does that count?
No, I would have thought in the old days what would have counted was the kind of the comb overs, the Ralph Coates overs or the Bobby Charlton overs was kind of the equivalent of a toupee or a wig.
I mean, Antonio Conte has a hair transplant.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Nothing wrong with that, is there?
No, I mean, he was like balding when he was a player. He thought he'd look nicer with hair, and he went and got it done.
Still lots of connections with Shakespeare, and more of them in your direction, I'll be honest, Mina. This is from Tim in Harrogate, who says, with reference to Will Shakespeare, did you hear about the dreadful game in Italy? It was between Roma and Juve, yet yielded no goals in a comedy of errors. You get it? There was just one shot that hit the Bard, and it was much ado about nothing. Nothing. Yeah, do you know that? Much ado about nothing. It was a 0-0, in other words. Much ado about nothing. I thought it was funny, but Mina's not playing ball tonight, so to speak. How about this one? You kind of answered the Totti one before, but Andrew in Crystal Palace says, is this the end of the line for Totti? And that's not the first time you would have heard that question.
One only hopes it's the end. I feel sorry because he is such a great talent, but my God, does the guy love himself? Actually, interesting. When we talked about why we're talking about these guys with the big egos and stuff, he also fell out with good old Ranieri. At the time, they were constantly arguing, and they used to say, "Oh, there's nothing going on between us" and all that business. But Totti used to take all these pot shots about the style of football that Roma played under him at one point, saying it was far too defensive, and how could they even dream of getting anywhere or playing this kind of football? But anyway, is it the end of the line? The directors want it to be. They want him to take on a role now in upstairs in the boardroom. He still wants to be a player. There's all these talks that if he is granted another term, another season to play, then Spalletti will walk out. It's unlikely that the directors will do that, or even though they're under huge pressure from all the remaining coaches in Italy who continue to voice their opinion about Totti's greatness. So what I think will happen is if he insists on playing, then he'll probably go to the MLS. I know he's being scouted by the UAE clubs and so on, some things in the Middle East, but I think that he'll probably end up in the MLS because I don't think Roma will give him another season. So either he takes the director role or he has to move league.
And Russ in Shrewsbury says the West Ham have signed an 18-year-old Tony Martinez from Valencia. I believe he's been dubbed the Wonder Kid. Is he a good investment, do you know?
From the Spanish striker?
Yeah.
Well, he was prolific when he was growing up. He has a really good, a really good attitude to the way that he plays, and he moves around really well. And what we like about him the most, or what he was most famous for, was how well he works with a teammate. So he's a team player, not so much of an individual. But you never know with these things because Valencia is a whole different concept to West Ham. Well, I guess he did work under a more physical regime. I'm just wondering whether he can handle the physicality of it all. But I really don't know. He's 18 years old, and we have to see what happens.
Yeah, and I'm sorry about this, Tim, but it's all about Shakespeare tonight. You know that. And this from Ronnie in York, Mina. Ronnie says, Verona won Serie A in 1985, and he wants to know whether in that Verona team there were 2 gentlemen of Verona and 9 reprobates. Well,
sure, yeah.
That's a good one. That tickled me pink. This other question for both of you. You know, we've heard
on the question of kind of gentlemen and reprobates. There's one Brazilian club president this week who was moaning about his club's hiring policy and said, you know, they're just too nice. The players that's where we went wrong. They're too nice. They're all going to church. You're not going to go anywhere like that, all going to church. We want to get some players who want to go to the whorehouse, not players who just want to go to church all the time. So he wanted he would have gone for the team with 9 reprobates and 2 gentlemen.
Wait, you say that, but there was a similar story ages ago actually only a year ago with Fiorentina Perez saying that he didn't want Pogba because he was too attached to his family and seemed too much of a good boy. And I was like, surely that's something that's good because you didn't do that well with the likes of Antonio Cassano.
Johnny in Leeds says Chilino doesn't like purple. That's why we let off purple balloons at kick-off each week at Ellen Road.
Oh, I like Chilino. Did you hear what he said about Mourinho? If he had the courage, he'd take them on.
Did he say that?
Yeah, he was like, Mourinho thinks he's so great, but if he was a real man, if he was really interested in football, really wanted to show what he could do, then he'd take us on board. I told him that. And I was like, and he politely declined. I was like, yeah, no go.
You know, Neil in Ashford has reminded us that there is one celebrity inexorably linked, as he puts it, with a football club, Michael Jackson and Fulham. Of course, didn't think of that. You know, they built a statue outside the stadium for him as well. But that was because of their previous owner's connection, rather than perhaps Michael Jackson's connection with Fulham. But still,
I can't really imagine that one of the first things that Michael Jackson did after Fulham games was get on the internet to check the score. You know, I'm not really sure how close that connection was.
You don't know. That's the answer to that one, Tim. You just don't know. You know, you look in the mirror and see if you see a man in it. You just don't know, do you? Now, Neil in Ashford, who's loving the show and tolerating the singing, who posed that point about Michael Jackson, does want to ask on a serious note a question for you, Mina. He enjoyed your profile of Antonio Conte's character and style a few weeks back, but now it's confirmed that he'll be Chelsea's boss. What will he be, or what do you see that he'll be coming into? What do you foresee for Chelsea under his stewardship?
I think sometimes when I talk about Antonio Conte, I get accused of not actually being a fan of his. So I probably see more of his weaknesses than I see his strengths.
You're not really a fan of his, though, are you?
No, I'm not. Italians are famed for their tactics. I don't think he's a good tactician. I think that he's a great motivator. He's great in working on your psychology. He makes you believe and all of that business.
Can we just get this down on tape? You're saying that Chelsea are going to get stuffed next season, are you?
No, I don't. I think that I don't think Mourinho is necessarily the greatest tactician in the world, but he's a great manager. Antonio Conte isn't the greatest tactician. I mean, like, he will get stumped on certain occasions with formations and with these types of things. He creates wonderfully organized teams.
Okay.
He knows what kind of football he wants to play.
Yeah.
But sometimes I think when you're comparing him to the likes of
Sure,
Guardiola
sure.
or Allegri, they're much
Okay.
better in actually sussing things out and making the right substitution.
It is something of a world first, a world football phone-in first. I guess it's a world radio first. I don't know anybody else that has brought Shakespeare together with a conversation about world football ever. I can't think of anybody. So we're talking world football, European football, South American football, and players from over there playing in our leagues, and somehow mixing Shakespeare into the mix on the 400th anniversary of the Bard's demise. Now, they can, if you want to bring in a Spanish connection, we can, of course, talk about Cervantes, the Spanish Shakespeare to a certain extent, the author of Don Quixote, who coincidentally, apparently, died on the same day as Shakespeare as well. So any connections you want to bring in, feel free. Did you not know that?
The author of Don Quixote died on the same day.
Don Quixote. If you don't behave yourself, I'll go back to calling it.
In Brazil, they call him Don Quixote. It drives me mad. It's Don Quixote, I tell you. And then they say, no, it's not. It's Robinson Crusoe. It's Robinson Crusoe. Robinson Crusoe.
That one's amazing.
When will they learn?
I'd love to hear how they say Adebayor in Brazil. But, remember, we used to call it Don Quickstow. Or Quixote, I think, when we were kids. That was going back some time. Anyway, John in Bradford wants to know that 0500 909 693, by the way, I should tell you, if you'd like to join in the conversation. So we're talking, ostensibly, we're talking football in Europe and South America, but talk about whatever you want to talk about. John in Bradford says, can we include Gaza in footballers who threw it away and came back? It was brief, but Gaza nearly ended his career in 1991 and recaptured a glimpse of his magic in Euro 96, of course, to score a sublime goal against Scotland and come within millimetres of scoring a golden goal in the semi-final against Germany as well.
He
It's a good one.
He came back as a different player, didn't he? And I think he was always, as a footballer, he was much, much brighter than people gave him credit for. And when he came back, he didn't quite have the same lung-busting capacity that he had before. But when he was at his best after he came back, he didn't give the ball away too much. So I think he came back a more intelligent player, but because of his physical limitations, a different one. Doesn't always work. I remember Colin Bell trying this. The great Colin Bell,
Manchester
when
City,
he suffered
wasn't
a
he?
serious knee injury in the mid-70s, and he was out for 2 years. It was a more serious one than Gascoigne. And when he came back, he played on for a couple of years, and he just tried to keep it simple, play first time. But he quickly saw that he couldn't be anything like the same player. It is very, very difficult, isn't it, to come back?
Lee in Dartford wants to pull all the strings of tonight's conversation together. Lee, good morning.
Hello there, I'll try to. By the way, that guy with the comb over in the 60s, the Burnley and Tottenham player, just to put it in a language Dino will understand, wasn't he Ralph Coates? Anyway.
Burnley and Everton, I think it is, not Tottenham. Burnley and yeah, he's definitely Ralph Coates.
Ralph Coates.
Wasn't Ralph Coates?
Ralph Coates.
Wasn't he Burnley and Everton?
Burnley and Tottenham.
Oh, but
Burnley and Tottenham. I think he might have gone to Orient and that afterwards, but it was certainly Tottenham, because I remember watching him, and sometimes he'd go for a run down the flank because he was a winger, and he'd arrive in first place, and his hair would arrive in 7th or 8th.
Okay, enough jokes about follically challenged.
With a corner flag in tow as well, I would imagine.
That's right.
Yeah.
The Shakespeare reference, guys.
Yeah.
3 of you do this show.
Yeah.
But at the end of it, Dotton, really, you should say, when shall we three meet again?
Oh, that is dark. That is heavy. Well, I can tell you this, that I cannot be killed of any man born of woman. You know that.
Ah, right. So
You have to be untimely ripped from your mother's womb to...
Watch out for those cesarean kids.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, I've got a few things, actually. There are teams in Europe that did a Leicester, very famously in the fatherland, where I lived for a while, in 1997-98, Kaiserslautern, freshly promoted from the second Bundesliga, won the first Bundesliga.
They beat Bayern Munich.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you know this, Mina? That's your territory.
No, I didn't. What year?
Otto Rehhagel, later manager of Greece. when they won the European Championships, was the manager of Loughton at the time. Yeah, they got relegated and they got promoted, and they ran away with the league. And I think there was one match, I can't remember who it was against, but I remember I couldn't believe it. They were 6-0 down at half-time, Kaiserslautern, Loughton, and they won 7-6. I think it was in that season, but they definitely beat Bayern.
That is a good shout for
But they weren't.
the European Leicester. Sorry? Go ahead, Mina.
So Kaiserslautern, I guess they were never really considered a small team as such.
Well, they weren't, but they'd just been... season
Oh, because
before,
they'd been relegated.
They were relegated down to the second Bundesliga, and then they were promoted again.
And be careful suggesting that Leicester's a small team, Mina, because I can assure you, Leicester City fans have been telling me the mighty Leicester City for some time. So,
No, but the reason why I say this is because Kaiserslautern has won it, I think, 3 or 4 times, whereas Leicester City has never won the Premier League.
Yet.
From the point of view of a second division team coming up, beating a team that, Bayern Munich have won the Bundesliga 95% of the time since the thing was founded, so that was an achievement. Yeah. And
that was indeed.
A famous team that play in purple.
Oh, right, we've got some of those as well.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
And with celebrity endorsements, Eric Morecambe for Luton Town.
Luton Town.
Okay.
Every chance he got on the show, he would always mention Luton. So when they did a Julius Caesar passage. Oh, Shakespeare again. He was like a guard, and he was carrying the Roman banner. And instead of SPQR, it had LUTON or LTFC. I can't remember which one. He was always going about Luton. So.
I always thought it was Ernie Wise who wrote that Julius Caesar. It Shakespeare all along. I thought it was one of those plays what Ernie wrote.
It was one of those what Shakespeare wrote.
Tim's having a laugh. Well done. You've tied everything up. What, there's got more?
No,
go on.
More. Manchester United. This is a bit lateral. Bearing in mind its claim to fame was in a 1970s sitcom called The Good Life, and it's the base of the majority of Manchester United fans. I suggest the town of Surbiton. And star of University Challenge and maybe star of Celebrity Mastermind Next Christmas. Dotton had a bio.
No, I'm not sure about that.
Athletic.
Yeah, okay, very, very, umbilically linked. Not as umbilically linked as Michael Grade, though. Michael Grade, I think, is our big celebrity.
Spurs, it's got to be Legendino.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you've got a man called that's a legend anyway, you can't get higher than that.
Yeah.
I'm a
and
terrible
Piers Morgan for
supporter,
Arsenal, because basically they deserve each other.
Yeah.
Both think they're much better than they actually are.
And don't forget...
I said Piers Morgan, no one was listening to me.
Oh, sorry, we missed that. But don't forget Mina Rizuki in Juventus. Don't forget that, Lee.
I love that you call them Juventus.
I know, she loves the way we say Juventus. She insists it's Juve or whatever it is. Juventus.
It must thrill her to bits to know that an ex-Juve manager is doing so well in the English Premier League.
Yeah. Does it?
Yeah, we love him.
Yeah,
Ranieri.
Thrills you to bits to know that he's doing well in the Premier League rather than in Italy.
I never consider him as an ex-Juve guy, though. I consider him as just an ex-everything guy. He did so many big clubs in Italy that I consider him.
Answer us this, just for our benefit, Lee. Answer us this, Mina. Is he putting on that Italian accent? I mean, is he doing it because he knows that we all fancy him? You can't possibly say anything negative because he's got such a polite, unassuming
what's the matter,
accent.
You've got no respect.
No, I don't think about winning the Premier League. I don't think about it. I think only about 40 points. He's Nigerian, by the way. He is Nigerian, yeah.
There are 2 points of reference to that I think he's using. One you've mentioned is Joe Dolce. And the other one is the guy who later on went on to work on EastEnders, who in LOLO played the Italian liaison officer talking to the beautiful ladies. Beautiful ladies.
That's terrible. Is there really a character in EastEnders that does that? You beautiful ladies.
He went on to EastEnders. He went on to
he's saying it started with LOLO.
But in LOLO...
Oh,
he was the Italian officer guy with the feather in his cap.
Of course.
He was my favourite.
Of course.
You actually reminded me, Arthur Bostrom, the policeman there, perhaps Richard Osman and Fulham, who could be another celebrity link.
Yeah.
Oh, I got an interesting... I got an interesting DM about Michael Jackson on Twitter just now.
Yeah.
And he was an Exeter City fan. He was their director, honorary director.
He was also a statue outside Craven Cottage for Fulham.
Of course. But how many matches did he go to with Exeter City, do you think, Mina?
I don't think... well, I know that he must have gone once because apparently he said that he was crazy about them. I don't know. I've got to look this one up if it's true or not. But apparently it's honorary club.
You know who we have to blame for that? Uri Geller.
Yuri Geller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But hang on.
His best friend Michael Jackson along to watch them.
Hang on. Yuri Geller was... he was Reading, though, wasn't he, Yuri Geller?
Exeter.
No.
He was the one who took him to Exeter.
Really? Because I always thought Yuri Geller was a
Exeter.
Reading fan for some reason. Does he live in Reading?
He could bend himself into any shape.
This is
support
true.
any team.
And he used to bend me, shake me any way I liked it, whatever the song goes. I think you've done us well tonight, Lee. Thank you very much, sir. Really appreciate that.
No problem, guys. Have fun. And don't forget your Three Witches closing speech.
Yeah. Hobble, bobble, toil and trouble. And those lines weren't even in the play, I know, but...
No, it's when shall we three meet again in thunder, lightning, or in rain.
When shall we meet again?
In thunder, lightning, or in rain. When the hurly-burly's done, when the battle's lost and won.
Yeah. Good old witches. Good old witches. What you can do is dip me in water, and if I float, I'm not a witch. Or if I float, I am a witch. But if I don't float, I'm innocent.
Or according to Holy Grail, you're made of wood.
Yeah, let's stick to that one. I think that concludes that point. Sorry that Mina didn't find my previous Shakespeare connection very funny, says our listener. So please can I ask you all a serious question? Northern Ireland played Germany on the 21st of June in Euro 2016 tournament. Can they beat the Germans, or is it just a Midsummer Night's Dream? Boom, boom.
Very good.
Yeah, very, very good. That's from Tim. Mina?
Oh, sorry. Oh, is that a genuine question?
Yeah, that is a genuine question.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
June the 21st. We're all going to be dancing naked around the maypole.
Do you think it's so laughable?
Do
you think it's so laughable that Northern Ireland can beat Germany? You're not even going to answer their question.
Oh my God, by the way, I'm actually so scared to answer this question. I did a TV show once and I said something where they were talking about when Ireland was against, Republic of Ireland was against Italy. And I said they had no chance, and I got so much hate mail. I was genuinely scared to leave the house after that.
So you're literally banned from going to Ireland in the way that Tim Vickery will be if he carries on quoting or doing Northern Ireland, if he carries on impersonating the Reverend Ian Paisley. Anyway, sorry, go on.
You love it. Yeah, I do think it's a Midsummer Night's Dream. We are talking about the World Cup winners in Germany, and they have a tremendous team going forward. With the fact that they understand each other. I mean, just the names alone, you've already seen what Mesut Ozil has done, 18 assists in the Premier League this season. They've got the whole Bayern Munich spine, and it doesn't seem like anyone will be missing. So I think that anyone beating them will be a challenge. Obviously, there's a German saying that says they always win unless they meet the Italians. So that'll probably be the team that may beat them. But if I'm honest, no matter... I don't know, because Northern Ireland play with a lot of intensity, a lot of heart, a lot of passion, but that doesn't work because Joachim Löw knows quite, he's so well suited to the team. I'm not a huge fan of his by all means, but hey, he won the World Cup, so I think he deserves to be regarded as the favourites for this alongside France.
Nigel Kennedy and Aston Villa, apparently, says Danny in Guernsey in the Channel Islands are a umbilical link.
Just ask Mina a question on the tournament. And do you think that, the fact that this is midsummer, does that mitigate against teams like Northern Ireland who will put their emphasis on hard collective work? Do you think that the hot weather is a factor that might help the quality come through?
That's a good question. Largely because this has been discussed quite a lot in Italy when it came to the Italian national team because of the tactics deployed by Antonio Conte. When there is less individual talent and more focus on the collective unit, which is the case, let's say, with Northern Ireland and it is with the Italian national team, then yes, I do think that's where teams who play good football, who rely more on the ball doing the work as opposed to their relentless running, have a better shot. I don't know how hot it's going to be in France and how much that's going to endanger them. It also has to do with what the teams are going to be capable of. So the hotter countries and those who come from warm climates and have to play like that regularly will be more accustomed to it. But I would say, yes, that's where you'll see the better teams winning this type of tournament more. Also, it's the tactics, right? Because Antonio Conte is so, for example, so criticized for the fact that he uses high energy, and doing that every 3 days can be so exhausting that you just, it's a little like what Italy did in the last Euros when they came up against Spain. They were just exhausted by the time they reached then, because they were playing every 3 games. The tactics weren't helping them because of the formation that they deployed in the 3-5-2, and they were exhausted. And when you have teams like Northern Ireland who will focus more on the running as opposed to the individual talent within the collective, then, yeah, I feel like that's why there will be teams like Germany and Spain will have the advantage.
John in Peterborough says, yes, I've seen your nephew play. Laugh out loud. LOL. He says, that's my so nephew, nice. This is, yeah. He says, so nice. The question about teams that have done a lesser, though, and players that have hit the top and bottom and back, well, mix the two and you could get the current Rangers team, he says. They could fall under both categories. I'm not sure about that. No. Yeah. But I suppose teams that made comebacks, yeah, definitely in that way. Baz in Brighton says the famous Dulwich Hamlet play in pink and blue. Hamlet's a link to the Bard. Can't think of any purple clubs, though. Yeah, Hamlet. Do you know Dulwich Hamlet? You must have come across that in your travels, Tim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it kind of squares that they play in, like old Blackburn Rovers shirts?
I don't think so. No, I think it's pink tops.
It's a bit like an ice. It looks like ice cream. You know, that kind of
Maybe.
Ice cream.
Yeah. It's that Battenberg cake look. Is that what you're going for this morning?
I bow to your superior knowledge of this on this.
No.
This subject.
I insist. You've got the sweet tooth as well. Bert says after the Leicester West Ham game, when the ref finally gave a penalty for WWF wrestling in the box, he could have given 4. Do defenders do this in their respective regions? I think there'll be a clampdown in the Premier League next season. Do defenders in your respective region get involved in WWE wrestling with their opposing strikers in the box? To what extent can they get away with it in South America, Tim?
Lots. And this goes on all the time. Occasionally you see a brave referee give a penalty for it, but it goes on and on and on. I think this is such a difficult area for the referee because he can only look. He can't see all of it going on. But this is... I wonder, looking, say, 10, 15 years ahead, I wonder what video technology, which is obviously going to come in at some level, I wonder how much video technology will have an effect on this.
Mina?
Yeah, I guess it happens, but not as much. It happens quite a lot in Italy, especially when you look at set pieces. You'll see the likes of Lichtsteiner, who was famous for doing that against Celtic, that he will try to just, tackle these players and grab onto them. It happens less so in Spain. Referees love to call foul on everything over there. But I would say in Italy it's something that they need to be more careful about, because when they do play in Europe, they have to understand that things change and they can't be as aggressive as they are. And that's why sometimes they lead to unnecessary mistakes. But they have been spoken to. The referees apparently did, like all these, the associations had a chat. This is in Spain. They had it in Italy about, tips and how to get this to be clamped out, because it needs to be a little bit cleaner in the box. And of course, it never is. It's exactly like Tim says, it's a difficult subject.
We did find a team that plays in brown. Apparently, Coventry played in brown for their away kit.
Horrible second strip in the 70s. It was awful. Really, really horrible.
Yeah. But you know what? I have sort of another team that play in purple. Valladolid. Real, and they play in the second division, but they were in the first division in Spain. So they play in purple.
Does it make a difference what coloured teams play in? I mean, does it make a difference to performance, do you think? There were all those arguments about when England played in grey that they couldn't see each other and that kind of thing. Does it really make a difference, really?
Well, apparently teams that play in red are more intimidating. I don't know if that's true, but I mean, if you look at it, Arsenal, Manchester United, Liverpool, they are historically good clubs.
Manchester
That is
United,
what they say.
Arsenal, Liverpool. When was the last time either of those teams won the league with all their intimidation?
Hey, yeah, but let's compare that to everyone else.
Back up Mina's points. And Jurgen Klinsmann obviously thinks it makes a difference. And when he took over as Germany coach, one of the things that he did, he swapped. You know that Germany's reserve, the second colour, used to be green. He swapped it for red, exactly on that basis. He said, "We're not green, we're red. We're in your face." So for him, the colour had a lot to do with the identity of the team that he was trying to create.
Listen,
there are some psychological things as well. You remember what was one of the first things when Don Revie took over at Leeds United in the early 60s, when Leeds were languishing? What was the first thing he did? He changed the shirt colour to all white. We are Real Madrid. That is the bar of quality that we are going to set. And he did pretty well with that, didn't he? So there's obviously some psychological effect here and there.
You will remember, Tim, from years ago, Dave the Milkman. Do you remember? He's a Charlton Athletic fan. Always used to tune into the World Football Phone-In as he's doing his milk round on a Saturday morning. And he says, "I love hearing about your nephew, Dawson. Here's a pic." He's just tweeted me a pic of his youngest signing for West Ham this week.
Oh, well done.
He's got a number 9 on his shirt. So I'm assuming he's 9 years old. And Dave, I can imagine you are the proudest parent in the world, because it's bringing tears to my eyes seeing your photograph, because I know what probably the sacrifices that you've made, and it's a really emotional thing. Again, with I'm not saying this just because it was my nephew, but the most touching thing I ever read that really reduced me to tears when I read it was a football article with my nephew, and he's there playing one of those video games as he's being interviewed. His mind's on the video game. And he said that, when I told my father that I'd been signed to Peterborough on a professional contract, I told him down the phone, and my father broke down crying, and I couldn't believe it. And I was reduced to tears because, my younger brother, his father, he's like, big rugby playing guy, and you just think to yourself, wow, that's what it means. It means a lot. There's a lot of emotion in there from family members. Anyway, thanks a lot for that picture. It's a great pic as well, and I'll retweet it with your permission, by the way. I'm sure others would want to see it. And
no, we don't want to put any pressure on the young man, but please, Dave, can you just keep us informed of his progress?
Yeah.
He's one of our own.
Absolutely, exactly. He's one of our own, to quote a certain football team in North London. Anyway, Jerry in Hereford says, celebrity link, Jimmy Hill at Coventry, of course. Why not? And they pay tribute to him in their own ways when he passed away as well very recently. So, other questions? 0500 909 693. So we're talking football in Europe and South American players from over there playing in our leagues as well. Shakespeare would have been a Villa fan to be or not to be relegated. Boom, boom. Although, he could have chosen other teams around that area as well.
Oh, Tom Hanks is a Villa fan.
So is he? Is that what he's saying, lately? Like what's his name? Rambo. He's Sylvester Stallone.
Sylvester Stallone is an Everton fan.
Apparently so. I'm not sure. He didn't look like he knew much about what was going on in the game when he came over to wax lyrical about his support for Everton. Just like Spike Lee, showed up. And I remember Brian Alexander used to do a program here on 5 Live, and he was sitting in for Simon Mayo when Spike Lee comes in wearing an Arsenal shirt.
I remember that, yeah.
And I think Brian
Please,
Alexander...
Spike, do the right thing.
Come on. No need to rub it in them gooners, Come on, man. I know they've had their glory years, and now you're celebrating before your time, I hasten to add, but give them a break. But when Spike Lee came onto the Simon Mayo programme, the afternoon programme at the time on 5 Live, and Brian Alexander was sitting there, Brian Alexander seemed to take umbrage. And, Brian's a good friend. I'm not knocking him in any way. He's a brilliant broadcaster. He seemed to take umbrage at the fact that Spike Lee walks into his studio with an Arsenal shirt, and he says to Spike Lee, "What are you doing wearing an Arsenal shirt?" And Spike Lee doesn't kind of get the passion that might be associated with that. Just say, "Oh, well, it's just, somebody gave it to me. I just picked it up and put it on." "Yeah, but are you an Arsenal fan?" So, "Yeah, well, why not?" Kind of thing. Didn't quite get it. Apparently, Kelsey Grammer, do you remember him as Frasier? He went.
Yeah, my favourite chair.
Well, he went to a Bristol Rovers and Rochdale game. I think his wife is from Bristol, says Moose. Does that make him a Bristol Rovers celebrity or not, do you think? I mean, if you go to one game, particularly if you're a Yank, what do you reckon, Tim?
Well, it's a long way to go, isn't it? I suppose, and it's a little bit off the beaten track. And if it was Arsenal, then you just put it as a tourist experience. But I think going to Bristol Rovers, that's shown a level of commitment which I think is laudable.
You happy with that, Mina?
Sure.
How about this from Stephen in Southampton? He says, purple example. We've had lots of examples of purple kits tonight, starting with the famous one of Fiorentina. He's gone for SV Austria Salzburg. They played in violet, and it might be Austria Salzburg, but I try to put a little European twist to the accent. He says they played in violet and white and won tons of trophies for 7 decades before the Red Bull takeover. A fan-led pro-violet breakaway side. I like that. A fan-led pro-violet breakaway side. Surely one of the best sentences in history.
What other show would you hear that on?
Stephen says, surely one of the best sentences in history. That's why I said it again. Anyway, it started after Red Bull arrived and has got to the second ties now, this fan-led pro-violet breakaway side that we now know about. So you were going to say something about the Mina, Austria Salzburg?
No, they were just they're famous for wearing purple as well. We forgot about them. We also forgot about Toulouse.
Yeah,
Sorry,
they have lost.
I don't know
lot.
anything about about how good they are in comparison and how far they've fallen.
Yeah,
I'm afraid not.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No problem. Tony Liverpool says the only Shakespeare connection that you can come up with for our World Football phoning this morning is that his daughter's currently in Stratford on Avon rehearsing As You Like It, and she's an Everton fan and usually listens to the World Football phone-in with him. So I know it's nothing to do with world football, but I've run out of people to brag about it too. So, well, yeah, brag about it to us. Good bragging, I think. That wasn't bad bragging at all. With Prince living at Paisley Park, was he a St Mirren supporter, says Ronnie in York?
Oh, very good.
Yeah,
very
I
good.
thought that was, very good indeed. And not done yet with the very goods. You know, there's more to come. This one is long, so put your feet up. This is from Kyle in Seattle, USA. He says, I've been listening to your show for about 9 years now, and I was playing football this morning with my work colleagues for the first time in a while, and it got me thinking about a few things I've heard on your show. Tim has mentioned the difference between Messi for Barcelona and Argentina being how far he is away from goal when he receives the ball. That's the difference of Messi in Barcelona and Argentina. I was having to go box to box, and you're a bit tired trying to attach after you get the ball back. Also, the difference between football fitness and other forms of fitness, i.e. running or rowing. I do both, and I could really tell the difference early on. Finally, you forget how good the top pros are when, after only watching for a while, you try to do it, or you try and do it yourselves. Great show as always. I don't know where the question was in that. I think it started off really well, and I thought you're going for something. What about this difference between Messi for Barcelona and Argentina, and how far you are away from the goal, Tim? Explain what you meant by that.
Well, I think what we got there from, was it Kyle there from Seattle?
Yeah.
It was a tribute to Victoria Wood. You know, she loved to make her observations. She was a comedian of observations, and I thought they were really good observations from Kyle. How different football fitness is. And football is a game of twisting and turning, of changes of rhythm. Very different from some other sports. Yeah, but the thing with Messi in Argentina is that every coach that Argentina has had since the 2010 World Cup they've tried to recreate that 4-3-3 formation in which Messi thrives at Barcelona. And, they've won games. They've certainly won more than they've lost. But it's never been entirely convincing. And one of the main reasons for this, I think, is that the Barcelona defensive line plays very, very high, and they relentlessly press when they win the ball. If they can't win it, then okay, maybe they'll fall back, but they don't want to go into their own penalty area to defend. That's one of the reasons that they can get away with Javier Mascherano at centre-back, because in a conventional team he'd be too small to play there because he'd be heading the ball away in his own penalty box. But because Barcelona defend very high, he doesn't have to do it, and Barcelona can get away with it. Now, all of this has repercussions on how much room Messi has to occupy on the pitch, where he's receiving the ball. And with Argentina, and it's a real problem for position for Argentina, is the centre-backs. They don't have a lot of pace in that position, and they won't let Martin Demichelis of Man City retire. And he wanted to retire after the Copa America a year ago, and they won't let him because they're still weak in that position. It's one of their priorities to find quicker centre-backs. But because they don't have them, and they don't have the time together to drill the pressing that Barcelona do, the defensive line will tend to operate much deeper. Now, what is the consequence on this for Messi? It means that often he has to drop very, very deep back into his own half just to get the ball. Now, remember that the international tournaments are played at the end of the year when the leading players are often out of gas anyway. So you put in those two things together, Messi, end-of-season tiredness, coupled with the fact that that for Argentina in these end-of-season tournaments, he's having to drop back, he's having to cover much more room much more space on the field, and it's clear that he can't play in the same way. This was so clear from being inside the stadium, especially during the World Cup 2 years ago, and he was absolutely rationing himself, and he was spending quite a lot of the time just wandering around, glancing at the floor as if he dropped his wedding ring or something, because he knew that in that context he only had enough gas in the tank to make 5 or 6 interventions in the game. Completely different from Barcelona, where when he's on the top of his game and when he's full of gas in the tank, he will control a game. And I think that so there are the two key differences: the extent to which he has to go back and cover more space for Argentina, and the fact that these tournaments are played at the end of the season when he's probably tired anyway.
Mina, would you agree, at least with the Barcelona side of that analysis from Tim?
Oh, 100%. And you can tell that when opponents try to play them, the clever ones will try to drag him deeper. So they'll try to stretch out Barcelona as much as possible. And I thought that whenever you can see how less effective he is when he has to go back and get the ball, especially if those two alongside him in Luis Suarez and Neymar aren't able to offer as much. And I thought that Atletico did a great job against them and really managed to mute his performances. And that is exactly that, because against Argentina, the team is a lot more stretched out. So he has to come back and retain possession. And when that happens, you're less efficient in front of goal. You've seen that a lot of times with some good players, some great players. And the difference is that you usually want your star guy, the guy who's going to score the goals, to stay further upfield so that he's not wasting all his energy running back and forth trying to get the play together. And that's why in Italy we're so in love with the trequartista role and so on and so forth. You have to bring it in, but as long as you have your star man up top, you get seriously yelled at. You always hear Allegri yelling at Mandzukic for always trying to go back and helping out. He says, stay at the top because you're more efficient in front of goal if you do that. And when you do that to Messi, if you try to drag him deeper, then you'll see that he's not the player that he is when he's allowed to stay further upfield.
Roy in Bedford, good morning.
Good morning, Dotton.
Hiya.
Good morning, Tim. Good morning, Nina.
Morning.
How's everybody?
Good morning.
On the board?
Everybody
Good
good,
morning.
thank you. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Roy. Yeah.
Before he became a celebrity, you've overlooked the great Alan Sugar at Tottenham Hotspur as a link to a club.
Oh, yeah.
That's very good. That's very good,
I
Ron.
just thought of an earlier one, Dalton. Back in the 60s, Tommy Trinder and Fulham.
Yes, yes, absolutely. That's a good call. That's going back in generation.
It's really significant as well because you had there, Tommy Trinder was a comedian in the entertainment business, so he knew the value of stars. So as soon as the maximum wage was removed and he could pay players, what did he do? He paid Johnny Haynes £100 a week. Johnny Haynes was the England playmaker, a magnificent player, and Tommy Trinder knew that he put bums on seats. And if I could go back, Roy. If I could get a time machine and go back and watch a player from the past, the English player that I'd most like to watch would be Johnny Haynes in his heyday.
I remember him at the end of his career. I was just a young lad in the 60s, Tim, but he could have played today with the style of playing that he had. He looked so relaxed on the ball. He pinged the ball across the field, landed it on a sixpence. He was outstanding, wasn't he?
He was good, yeah, he was good. And what was your question, though, Roy?
Oh, Well, it wasn't so much a question, but there was a suggestion again for another player who probably could have ended his career, but came back a couple of times.
Okay.
Midfielder for Everton, Paul Bracewell. He had two horrendous leg injuries, as I recall, and he ended his career, I think it was at Sunderland, playing on a match-by-match basis because his leg was in such bad state that they couldn't get insurance on him.
That's a good shout. That is a very good... What was this, in the 80s or 90s or something like that?
I think it was in the 90s, Doctor.
90s,
I
right.
remember he was on the fringe of the England squad. I think he made the squad a couple of times, but then he had one leg injury where his leg was shattered. He came back and continued playing for Everton, and then it got broken again. And then he came back, and I'm sure it was at Sunderland where he ended his career. But he was a pretty good player in his day.
Do you remember much about this, Tim?
That was a suggestion.
Do you remember much about
You really hope... he was an excellent player, and as Roy said, he looked like he was going to have an England career. He was one of those midfielders who were much better than they seemed to be. He was unfussy, did the simple things, and he kept the ball moving. Was a really good player. And just Roy reminding us of his story there, and what just came into my mind there is that you really hope that he's all right now, that he's not suffering from all of the not just the injury, but all of the efforts that he made to come back. So you hope that he's not suffering for all that these days.
Absolutely, yeah. No, thanks, guys. I didn't have a question. It was just a couple of suggestions.
You don't need a question.
Conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't need a question. You can join us with any comment that you want, mate. Roy, thank you very much. That was a good sort of shout, as it were, and gave us a chance to pontificate on that for a moment or two. Now, 0500 909 693. They've still got time, about another 14 minutes or so of this phone-in to go. And thanks for all your suggestions of celebrities linked with teams, amongst other things. Oh, yeah, and St. Pauli in Germany play in brown, Mina. Did you know that?
Oh, yeah, they do. Oh, it's just an awful colour. Why would anyone play that?
Raymond in Bells Hill was one who suggested that. Perhaps the reason they play it is so that, mud don't stick, if you see what I mean. And they can just wear the same kit again the next week without...
Yeah, save on the cleaning bills.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, here's a Tottenham question. Go on then. Philip in Nottingham wants to know, Tim, who... He knows that you support Tottenham. Do you think they will do well in the Champions League next season?
Maybe this might be... Next season might be a little bit of a bridge too far, but if you can keep that side together... I'm
coming to you, Mina. I'm coming to you. Don't worry. Just let the Tottenham boy pontificate for a moment or two.
Well, just remembering what happened in the Europa League, you do wonder if, and part of the Leicester Tottenham story this year is the fact that maybe the Premier League is, for whatever reason, I'd love Mina's thoughts on this. The Premier League is going through a very, very weak phase at the moment. So I don't know, personally, I'd still be a little bit sceptical about Tottenham going all the way in the Champions League next year. But if this group of players can stay together, maybe the year after that, because it's clear that there is something really special beginning to take place there.
Mina, let's be real now. Tottenham are going to get stuffed in the Champions League next week, yeah? Next season.
Actually, no. You know what? I agree with what Tim says. No, I'm a huge fan of Mauricio Pochettino. I mean, I was following this guy when he was in Espanyol. I thought he was a great talent, the way that the sports science and how well he engages with his players and the things that he looks for. He's not a guy who just goes for flash. He really understands which players fit what team and how to create a balanced one at that. But when it comes, I do agree with the fact that I don't think the quality of the football being played in the Premier League currently is maybe good enough to compete with some of Europe's best, especially considering that when we look at the fact that it's Leicester City and I would say I think Tottenham play a nicer brand of football, it will be tough because they need to match the challenges. So I'm sorry, as in the competition. And I don't know whether they are... I think he's tactically intelligent enough, Pochettino, to understand the teams that he's being played against. I don't think that in the Europa League he gave it his all because I don't think that was his concern. He was much more concerned with playing in the Premier League and trying to get the points and hopefully win it for the first time since the 60s. So I think that's been somewhat his focus, and that's why I don't think he's given it his all. Perhaps next season then if they actually focus on the Champions League, then they can do a little bit more. It just remains to be seen if they're disciplined enough or whether they can really play the style of football that they play so frequently and especially at a high level. You saw Sevilla, for example, are a team who do really well, obviously, in the Europa League because they've won it twice in a row, and then and they do well in their own league. But the difference is, and you saw that in the beginning when they had the Champions League to contend with, they couldn't do as well in the matches after that because they and Unai Emery described it. He's like, it's different when we're trying to balance the Europa League with the Premier League. It's a lower quality of football, so we can do it. But when we're trying to play in our own league and then also play in the Champions League, it takes too much out of us, and that's why we're not doing enough. And I wonder if that's going to happen to Tottenham. But if it's not now, then it will be later. So I do think that what they have right now, and I agree with Tim, this can really be built upon, especially if they can just continue to add quality to it.
Incidentally, Ian in Chester also tells us that St. Pauli in Germany, second division, play in brown. They're famous for their alternative approach and left-wing fan base. He says their stadium is next to Hamburg's large red light district, which is the Reeperbahn, or at least it used to be called that. This is from Steve. Plymouth Argyle lifelong fan Michael Foot, the late, was registered with
they registered him as a player one year. They gave him a squad number and everything, which I thought was absolutely brilliant.
He was an honorary fan. He was registered with the Football League as an honorary fan, which might, qualify as a player as well for his 90th birthday. And Plymouth's away kit this season is purple, he says. Yeah, I do have a recollection of that. Not just this season, they've had it before, haven't they? Is it Plymouth or Portsmouth?
I've got a purple. We had and Tottenham had a second shirt that was kind of purplish. I have one actually, and very nice it is too.
Yeah, you go and enjoy that. John,
that was quite mean.
John in Cambridge says, what? This is in Shakespearean language. You actual West Ham, not Alf. Garnet, Warren Mitchell was your actual, so well, it's Cockney Shakespeare, isn't it? It says your actual West Ham, not Alf. Garnet, Warren Mitchell was a Spurs season ticket holder. Don't forget, yeah. Spurs South Americans Aussie. Says Johnny Cambridge. The Proclaimers, Andy and Jamie Murray, Irvin Welsh, Judy Murray, and Fish from Marillion are all Hibbies. You know what a Hibbie is, Mina?
No.
A Hibernian fan.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. And Harchester United, dream team, it says here, play in purple as well. That's from John, who's heading home to Liverpool for a DJ gig in Derby. Pope John Paul, of course, and my second team, KS Kreshovia. Apparently he was obsessed, with the team, says Mark in Morecambe. Yeah, sorry, I've got loads of these to rattle through. We did ask for them, so I'm trying to rattle through as many as I can. And one celebrity endorsement I forgot to say was David Cameron and West Villa.
West Villa,
or is it Aston Ham, says Lee in Dartford. Yeah, very good. I think everybody appreciated that one. Yeah, do you remember a Bulgarian keeper at USA World Cup in '94 wearing a wig, Tim? It would be Mina.
No, he had a complete hair weave, didn't he? Because he was very, very bald, and in the next tournament he was full of hair. So it was a kind of Wayne Rooney job.
Yeah, kind of a Wayne Rooney. That's a bit of a stretch. This is Caroline in Normandy, wouldn't it be? Anyway, Carolyn says, surely Malvolio's words from Twelfth Night is appropriate for footballers. Be not afraid of greatness. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. Which footballer do you think that would apply to then, Tim, if you think it's so brilliant?
Well, there's three, isn't there? There's the born greats. Born great is Pelé. Achieve greatness, maybe someone like Kevin Keegan, who wasn't born great, but really, really worked hard. And have greatness thrust upon them would be Schillaci, who came from nowhere.
Cristiano...
And yeah, probably. But you're more up to date than I am, so I'll pass the ball over to you.
No, sorry, no, you're right.
It's too late. You've got the ball. You've got to do something with it.
No, I was just agreeing.
Don't prevaricate when you got the ball, Nina.
Born great, yeah.
Yeah.
With Lionel Messi.
Yeah.
what's the second one? Not thrust into greatness.
Achieved-
Worked hard for
achieved
it.
greatness.
Achieved greatness.
Yeah.
I would say is Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah.
And had greatness thrust upon them.
Yeah.
Kante.
Yeah, that'll
Well,
work.
no, that's through his hard
Yeah.
work as well.
Yeah,
Though.
all
Works very
those,
nicely.
I think that works, perfectly. By the way, Normanby is near Middlesbrough, and I apologise for not knowing that.
Wait, can I just say something? Isn't there a Bournemouth player that had a wig and it fell off during a game? Or am I going crazy?
I think you've gone crazy already.
There was a Bournemouth player who looked like he lost his wig.
Okay,
And it was like in a clash, and it was either the FA Cup.
I don't remember that.
Meaning
Someone's gonna come back
giving
to you on this.
You're giving all the signs now of someone who's suffering from chicken deprivation.
I thought that was very funny as well. Mark says, why purple for Fiorentina? Surely it's the ancient colour of royalty, isn't it?
It is the ancient the ancient colour of royalty, but for Italy, that's the azzurri colour that they play is blue. Fiorentina had to do with the fact that they put it in the washing. I actually looked this up, and they played in red and blue, and they put it in the washing machine and it became purple, and all their kits stayed purple, and they stayed with that. Juventus, when they were first inaugurated, they used to play in pink, but then obviously they took the black and white from Notts County as their inspiration, and that's when they changed colours, but that's why their away kit is pink. Real Madrid is another that actually played with pink as well for
Tim.
their away kit.
Tim, I don't think that Mina has got that chicken deprivation that you talk of, because Bailey Cargill...
I was right, wasn't I?
Bailey Cargill...
Tell me it's true. Tell me it's true. He had a wig.
Playing for Bournemouth in the Capital One Cup against Liverpool. They lost. And he made a dashing run up the field for the ball. And an unidentified object fell off his head. Now,
Was it a wig?
what that object was, I cannot confirm nor deny. But an unidentified...
It's showing... all right, then I'll take it back. Minu's showing all the benefits of a poultry-based diet.
Very good, very good, very good.
Oh, I was so glad.
Scott says, Mina, what do you think of Felipe Luis's claim that he doesn't know what Barcelona have to do to get sent off? And no matter what Barcelona do, they never appear to get sent off. E.g. Suarez should have been sent off when he kicked Diego Godin in the what? Don't even think about it, Tim. He kicked him in the Champions League, okay? So,
What do I think of his claim? Well, look, I mean, they complained a lot after the first leg because obviously after what they suffered and with Torres going off, and they just thought that they were harshly dealt with. I think in the second match, you saw that Andres Iniesta probably won them a penalty, but he didn't actually get it, even though he gave the penalty just before that. So I think it all leveled out for them, and they can't. The fact that Felipe Luis can come out and say these comments, and it's been talked about obviously in great length in Spain, but I don't think it's gotten the media attention that perhaps it deserves, because I think it was quite outlandish what he said. And he basically insinuated that everyone wants Barcelona in the Champions League, so this is what's going to happen. Maybe a lot of people agree with him. I'm not saying I do or I don't, but you can't really say these types of comments and then seem to get away with it. After all, Fabregas said something as small as, I want Leicester to win over Tottenham Hotspurs, and everyone now thinks they're going to throw away the game. So,
yeah, well, let's not delve on that one so much. We'll ask Tim about that next time around.
Is that a dagger I see?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
A2 Brute. Matt in China has wrapped up all our themes to this morning's World Football Phone-In by saying, on behalf of my Leicester-supporting brother Barney, who'll be dreaming of glory at home right now, I point out that this is the natural year for City to claim the title because Craig Shakespeare is first-team coach at the King Lear Power Stadium. This weekend, Leonardo Merchant of Venice Ulloa has to step up to replace Jamie Henry V Vardy. Richard III is the celebrity fan in the car park with his return mirroring the rise of the Foxes. Add in that Claudio Much Ado and Measure to Measure, Ranieri's boss, and surely even the Shakespearean link of Hotspur will be defeated. I thought that Hotspur was a very good one, Tim. And that's from Matt, who saw the Tempest last night in Guangzhou in China, keeping the Shakespeare coming. Thanks very much, Mina Rizuki, the Colonel. And thanks
Thank
also
you.
Legendino Tim Vickery.
On digital and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
bbc.co.uk/5live.